What's going on, Bears fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bears Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related. We got updates. The Bears have made all cuts in the second round of cuts. All 5 have been made, so we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the different way that David Mongomery and Roquan Smith are handling their upcoming free agency. We'll get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bears Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bears news and content.
All right, Bears fans, I gave the quick update after it was announced that Daz Newsome was going to be cut, but we now know the other 4 players that are also going to be cut on the Chicago Bears roster. So the Chicago Bears have waived Daz Newsome, as we talked about earlier, a young, only in the second year of his career. He's only played 3 regular season games for the Chicago Bears up to this point. Offensive tackle Julian Davenport as well, fullback Jake Vargas, defensive tackle Lakel London, and cornerback Bo Pete Haize have all been waived by the Chicago Bears, bringing that roster cut down to 80. Now we have a huge round of cuts coming up next week in which the Chicago Bears have to take that 80-man roster down to 53. So it's going to be a nice number of cuts from probably after Saturday's preseason game. So they'll probably start making cuts around Sunday or Monday morning. From that until a couple of days later, the Bears are going to be making a lot of cuts from that standpoint in time. So be on the lookout for Game 3 in the preseason the Bears to take a look at what players that we want to keep as depth pieces, who maybe is going to stick around for the practice squad. I don't think it's going to be a heavy snap game for any Chicago Bears starters. The Bears are really going to be looking at people who are on the fringe of staying on this team, as the Bears have to make a huge number of cuts to get it down from 80 to 53. So we'll see what happens with that. 27 people are not going to be on this Bears roster by the end of next week. It's going to be a very interesting time and just to see what happens with that Bears roster over that time, but they've made their cuts. Let me know down below, outside of Daz Newsome, who I've already asked about, who are any of these players that you would have thought were going to stay around? Bo Pete Haize is probably the one that I know the most, and he's probably played the most snaps for the Chicago Bears, and he was really inconsistent as well. He did some things at times, but at the end of the day, none of these players looking at this list were going to be impact players for the Chicago Bears. And an argument could be made that even some of the players that are going to end up staying around on this team are not going to be made impact players. But the Bears have made their decision. They've moved on from these players, and we're going to do that and move on as well into the next and last segment on today's daily episode of Chicago Bears Central. And this is talking about Roquan Smith and David Mongomery. Both these players are up for contract extensions by the end of the season, and a lot has been made about Roquan Smith has done so far up until this point. Roquan, making the holding out, then making the trade demand. Now, the contract negotiations have ended. But on the flip side of that, David Mongomery has really handled this quietly. He's come in, he's done his job. He says that a direct quote from David Mongomery here is, "It's going to take care of itself. I ain't really worried about that. I got bigger fish to fry. I've got a game coming up this week. I'm worried about that, not worried about a contract, none of that. Because at the end of the day, I'm still just trying to play ball. I'm trying to play football and have fun doing that. Everything else will take care of itself. I got no worries in the world." And that's kind of how you want a player. Like, he's confident, right? David Mongomery is going to get paid either way. And while C-Dub and Bobby have had conversations about, hey, with Khalil Herbert, with Treston Ebner being here, does that make David Mongomery expendable anyway, depending on what contract he wants and he's going to be seeking in the offseason? But David Mongomery has gone about his business. He's come into camp. He hasn't held out. He's by every stretch that we've heard, has been very involved. He knows he's going to have a big role in this team. And because of that, it's a level of calmness when it comes to David Mongomery in his upcoming free agency. He just seems settled, and he knows he's going to go out there and bet on himself. Now, Roquan is also betting on himself. Now, he's doing it in a different way. But David Mongomery just isn't making any fuss about it. He's going to come in, hopefully have a big season for the Chicago Bears, and at the end of the day, he's going to sit down, have that contract negotiation with the Bears, and in a league that maybe doesn't value running backs as what it did at one point in time, because running backs do, I don't want to say a dime a dozen, that makes it seem like it's just tons of impact running backs, but there are a lot of good, solid running backs, and you can build out your roster without having a big time paid running back and still have a very solid running game. Now, David Mongomery also, on the flip side of that, knows he's going to be a big part. He's going to get every opportunity to succeed, and he's going to get every opportunity to make the Bears, even if they even think about parting ways with him, to second guess that by the way he's going to play, the impact he's going to have, and him staying healthy. Those are the things that are in his control to agree. And even staying healthy is only so much in your own control. But David Montgomery, in the way that he's coming into the season, the way that he's handling, and I don't mean to play these players off of each other. It's not that, because I'm not saying one way's right or one way's wrong. It's just very different ways to go about getting the same outcome. David Montgomery is just going to bet on himself and his skill level and how he plays this season. Roquan Smith wants to get that extension locked in now. He doesn't want to wait. And there's a lot to be said about why that's understandable. This is the NFL. This is a league in which injuries come, and you can't really control when they do come. Almost every player has a major injury at some point that keeps them out for an extended point in time. When you're 200 plus pound men running into each other, it's bound to happen. And Roquan Smith, like I said, there's some ways in the St. Omni thing, even the release and things like that. Those are things that you can look at and say, hey, all right, man, listen, you didn't have to go about it that way. But as far as like holding out, that's commonplace amongst the NFL. I know a lot of Bears fans do have that. Well, you're under contract. Do what you. But listen, these are players that their whole career can be taken away from them in a single play. And so wanting that long-term security locked in, if you can get it, is completely understandable. And that's the thing that I do understand about Roquan Smith's plight and where he sits. Is the fact of the matter is, all it takes is a helmet to the knee at some random game over the course of the season to completely change his outlook on his career for a few years. For then at that point, you're Larry Ogunjobi, right? You're Larry Ogunjobi. You're a player that then, while good, while talented, if you're healthy, maybe has to take less to prove you can stay healthy for a while. And then God forbid you get injured again in that prove it season. So I understand Roquan Smith, the how good he is, ranked amongst other linebackers. This is not about the number, right? I'm not talking about the number or what he wants contractually, but coming in, holding out, wanting that extension to get locked in before you do things. I understand that, but I also understand David Montgomery just coming in, betting on himself. He's going to play football. He's going to go about his business. He's going to do his job, and he's going to let the chips fall where they may. There's just two completely different ways of both betting on yourself. Listen, Roquan Smith make no doubt about it. Roquan is betting on himself by coming into the season, going ahead and playing. And that may end with him leaving the franchise that he claims he loves. But he's betting on himself because he sees his value maybe differently than what the league, but damn sure what maybe the Chicago Bears view that value at. We talked about the de-escalators, and that idea. And while de-escalators are more common, there are not a lot of de-escalators in place for a player of Roquan Smith's stature. So, like I said, everything's kind of understandable. I'm not here to pass blame or say one way's right over the other way being right, but they are going about their upcoming free agency in very different ways. And we'll see if that ends up in one or both of them still being on this team, or maybe both of them leaving this team. This can go a lot of different ways. I still think there is a possibility that it does end with Roquan Smith still being a Chicago Bear. I do think that there's a possibility of that, but it looks more and more doubtful as things continue to go on. But let me know down below, what do you guys think? Do you think both these players end up still with the Chicago Bears? Do you think one of them, and if so, which one ends up staying with the Chicago Bears? Which one ends up leaving? Or do you think there's a world in which both players end up leaving the Chicago Bears at the end of the season? Now, before we go, one last topic. So the value of NFL's most valuable team list came out. And so it's interesting. The Cowboys, of course, lead with a value of over $8 billion, followed by the New England Patriots at $6.4 billion, the Los Angeles Rams at $6.2, the New York Giants at $6 billion, and then the Chicago Bears coming in at number 5 with $5.8 billion value. Now, this is very interesting when you think about almost all those other teams also own their stadium, so that means they're getting a bigger piece of the pie. They also have higher expenses as well, but the Chicago Bears not owning their own stadium is a big part in why we're seeing the move to Arlington Park probably be a thing that's going to happen and go down. Is that value of the Chicago Bears franchise is going to go up significantly once this Arlington Park situation works itself out. It's built and it goes. Don't be surprised if the Chicago Bears may jump up into the top 3. It'll take a while. It'll take maybe 2 or 3 seasons after that because they're going to have to recoup some losses. But this Bears team, the value of it, the fact that on top of that, we haven't been a winning franchise in quite a while and still have the value of what we do shows what the market of Chicago does. It shows the value of the Chicago Bears and why this fan base is so big. I just thought that was an interesting stat that I wanted to bring here and talk to you guys about, was the overall value of the Chicago Bears. Again, considering the Bears have not been a very good team for a while and have been on a decline, that's huge in many ways. I don't want to overlook that. And it's going to rise significantly with this Arlington Park situation and the Bears owning their own stadium. But let me know what you guys think about that down below. That is it for today's daily episode of Chicago Bears Central. Make sure you're following the show at Chi Bears Central on every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, chicagobearscentral@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text and or voicemail, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related. And like I like to end every episode on, bear down. Love you guys. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.